Well, hi, and welcome to the second half of Chapter 13. And so we've talked about radio buttons and checkboxes and all that sort of thing. So what we're going to talk about now are the different things we can do to these labels, these radio buttons and check boxes and so on and so forth. So the very first thing we want to talk about is if you open up, say, a menu item. For example, if I were to open up Notepad, you'll notice that, and that's not a good example. Let me open up something else here. So if I open up Microsoft Word, what we're going to notice is if you look at the menu bar is going to have certain features, and those features are, it's probably not a very good, not a good example there either. Well, anyways, so when we see menu items, we will see letters on each one of those words will have an underline. When we see that underline, we can hold down the Alt key, hit that letter, and it's like clicking that item. This is what is called a mnemonic. Okay? So a mnemonic says a letter will be underlined and allows us to keep our hands on the keyboard, hold down the Alt key, click that letter, boom, we have basically then achieved clicking that item without using the mouse. So the way we do that is we say set the mnemonic, which is a method inside of those different items like the J label, the J button, those types of things. So here's a new J button. We say this button dot set mnemonic, and what we're going to set it to is an integer type. Now, do we know all the integers for all the letters and numbers on our keyboard? No, we don't. But we've got this thing called a key event. And the key event is a class, and it has a method, or I should say a value. In this case, it's VKX. All we're worried about there is letter X. So VK underscore X says the letter X will be underlined in that particular word. So if I were to say, so here's my exit button dot set mnemonic key event dot VK underscore X. Notice the X is underlined in X. Okay. We can also do the same thing with our radio buttons and our check boxes or any of the other J-panel items. But realize we cannot use the same letters twice within a group. If we did, we would get an error. So for example, we normally have an edit menu and we have an exit menu. Well, exit starts with the E, edit starts with an E. So normally what we do is we always put the X and exit. We make that the underscore underlined item. So we'll see those examples here in a sec. So next we're going to talk about is this thing called a file chooser. And what that will do is it will bring up a dialog box allowing us to choose a file. Okay, this is what a file chooser looks like right here. I do have an example that I'm going to include in the chapter 13 section, but it basically looks like this. So I've got a thing right here called a J file chooser, and we're going to basically give it the name of FC. So we come through here. I'm not going to go through all this, but this does the same thing. It adds a panel to the J frame and so on and so forth. So what we do is we say FC equals new J file chooser. So we've got this object FC now. So now when I come down here, when I click on this button listener, it's going to basically do this. It says int val return. So we're creating a variable called returned val. It's an integer, and it says fc.showOpenDialog, FC chooser demo this. So what it's doing is it's displaying that file chooser window. Allows us to basically go in and select a folder and this and the other. We'll see an example in a second. And when I click on it and I click the button down below, the button will be returned to this returned value. And we've got these different items. Let me show you the examples there. we can capture the return value. And if it's a cancel option, that means we click the cancel button. If we clicked on the approve or the OK button, which is the open or save, that basically will give us the JFileChooser approve option. If we click anything else inside there, like the X in the upper right hand corner, that will give us the error option. Okay, so wherever we clicked on that screen, it will basically return one of those values. So again, this program doesn't actually do an open or a close. It pretty much mocks it. So if we run this guy, we'll see this in a sec as well. So what it does is it opens up this window. I click here and I'm able to select a file, and again I can click on this drop down just like you could any other Windows Explorer window. I can select a file, a new folder, another folder, click on a file, open it, and it basically displays that. And then I can actually then click Save File, and it brings up the same save window and allows us to then save it somewhere. So I could save it in the, we'll say the C drive in that folder, and click Save. We just saved it there. It didn't actually do anything, but just because there's a lot more coding behind the scenes. But just the whole point of this is there is a file chooser dialog box we can bring up. Another dialog box we can utilize is this thing called the color chooser. And when we select the color chooser, it brings up this dialog box where we can select a color. We just saw an example of it a second ago. And then we can capture what color it is and apply it to something. So let's just take a look at the code here. So here's what we've done. When we're building our panel, we've got this scroll pane. And so I can say color selected color. So that just creates a color object called selected color. I say selected color is equal to jColorChooser.showDialog, and this null says that's one of the parameters of the color chooser box. But we've got a label that says selected background color, and it says color blue. That's the default color. That's the default color that's going to be chosen. Then I can say button panel, that new panel, blah, 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 and we can say the button panel set background to the new selected color, meaning whatever we selected on that screen is what the background color is going to be for our button panel. So when I run this, whatever button I choose right here, let's say I choose this color green and I click OK, notice that our button panel is now set to that color. Okay? So pretty cool. So again, we could change the font, we could bring up a color changer for the font, a color changer for all the different items, and then basically allow the users to change those via that color changer prompt. Okay, so the next thing we get into is this thing called menus. Now you've probably used menus a lot just with all the different software packages like Word and Paint, and just basically anything has a bunch of these menus. So there's a lot of different pieces and parts there. So the main part is this line across the top, and that's called the menu bar. We have to create that, and we have to add the menu to that menu bar. This is a menu inside of a menu. Okay, so there's more to basically than just one menu. So I can create a menu, I can create another menu, and I put that menu inside of the first menu. Notice how we've got the lines that are underlined. We got to make sure we set the mnemonics to get those to take. So here are different parts. We've got a menu bar, we've got a menu, we've got a menu item, a checkbox menu item. Now that's different than a checkbox. This is a checkbox just for the menu. Radio button just for the menu. We've got a submenu and a separator bar. If you notice that there is a line going between paste and sort, that's called a separator line or separator bar. And that draws a nice line between items, and it's more for aesthetics. It doesn't actually do anything. It's just for viewing. So we have J menus. We got J checkbox menu item, J radio button, your menu item, J menu and J menu bar. Okay, so let's take a look at the code. Here we have our menu window, and there we basically have a bunch of instance variables. J labels, there's our constants for this, the width and the height. J menu bar, J menu, J menu, J menu item, J radio button menu item, there's 3 of those, and a J menu checkbox. So here's my constructor. When we instantiate this, it's going to automatically execute this constructor. We set the title, what to do when you click on the X. We go ahead and instantiate a couple of labels there. One says use the text menu to change my color, and we basically say swing contents.center, which automatically centers that within the panel. I don't think we've ever covered that before, but just realize we've got the swing constants, and if I do a control space there, I can do bottom, center, east, horizontal, leading, left. There's a whole bunch of different parameters for where do you want that text to basically be put in that panel. Set preference sized, so we can go ahead and change the size of that label. And there we can set the width and the height. We can set the foreground color black, so that changes the font to black. So the default right now is the text is black. We go ahead and add that message label. So add is a method inside of the J-frame. We go ahead and add the message label to this J-frame. We go ahead and build the menu bar. That's a method we're going to show here in just a second. Again, we'll pack it, make sure everything fits, and then we'll go ahead and display the J-frame. So here's our build menu bar method. We go ahead and instantiate our menu bar, that bar across the top. Right now it's got nothing in it. Then I build the file menu. We'll talk about that in a second. We build the text menu. Talk about that. So once we get through with those 2 methods, we have 2 menus that are created. I then go ahead and add each one of those menus to the menu bar. And then I go ahead and set J menu bar. That is a method inside of the J frame. So set J menu bar is a method inside of the J frame, and it says we're going to grab this menu bar that we just loaded up with a bunch of menus. We're going to add that. So we're going to set the menu bar inside the J frame with that menu bar. So we have to build our couple of menus first. So here's our file menu. So we go ahead and we instantiate our exit menu, which is instantiate as a new J menu item, and it's got the word exit on it. I say exit item.set mnemonic. Here we are, you set mnemonic. And the key event .vk_x. That means the X and exit will be underlined. If we have 2 X's in there, it will actually do the very first X that it comes to. Exit item.add action listener, new exit listener, meaning if we click on that exit button in the menu, it's going to execute that listener. Then I got my file menu, which is the J menu file. So now we got, remember how we had the file? And then we set the mnemonic key event .vk_f, so the F will be underlined. And we set a tooltip. Now we're setting a tooltip. If you hover over that file menu, it will display open the file menu. Now, we've got our file menu. We want the exit menu inside of the file, meaning when I click on the file, it will display the exit menu. How do we do that? I say file menu.add exit item, which is the exit item menu. So that puts that exit item inside of the file, and then as we saw up here at the top, we say menu bar.add file menu. We add that file menu to the menu bar. Okay. Well, first let's talk about our build text menu. So here I build a black item, new radio button menu, black.true. I set the mnemonic with an _B. I set the action listener to the color listener, meaning once we click on that button, it will automatically execute that action listener. I instantiate the red. It's set in red. Now notice the black was comma true, meaning that it will be set. It will be clicked. I create a red J radio button menu item. I basically set the mnemonic to R. It will basically execute the color listener. We go ahead and instantiate the blue J radio button. We set the mnemonic to the U in blue. Why didn't we do the B? Because B was already set to black. So we have to do a different letter. We do the U. Then I create a button group and I instantiate it. So now I can add those radio buttons to that group, and those radio buttons won't affect any other radio buttons because they're in their own group. And I add each one of those items to the group. Then visible item, that is a checkbox. We instantiate it as a new checkbox. We say visible is a label, and true means it has a check mark in it. I set the mnemonic to a V, and I go ahead and add the created action listener. If I check that box or uncheck it, it's going to execute the listener. Text menu, I instantiate as a new J menu with the word text on it. I set the mnemonic to T. So if I hold down the Alt key, hit T, that's just like clicking the text button. Text menu, I add the black radio button, the red radio button, the blue radio button. Look at this, I do a text menu dot add separator. That is a method that will draw a line across the menu. That's all it does. There's nothing else that thing does. And then I go ahead and add the text menu visible item, which is a check mark. So when I click on that text menu item, it's going to display 3 radio buttons, a line, and a checkbox. Again, down here is what happens when I click on the exit button. It will go ahead and do a system.exit 0. If I click on the color listener, which is the radio buttons, it checks to see, is the black item checked. If it is, it goes ahead and sets the foreground of the label to black, meaning the text. If it's red, it sets the foreground to red. If it's blue, it sets it to blue. We'll talk about these fonts here in a few minutes. Here's our visible listener. If it's checked, it's going to set the visible to true. If it's not, it's going to set the visible to false, meaning it won't display the label at all. And here's our public static void main, which goes ahead and instantiates this J-frame and kicks off that constructor. So if we run it, there is our menu. Notice we've got the F underline, the T underline. If I hold down the control key and hit F, it's just like clicking on that button. Hold down the Alt and hit X, it basically clicked on the exit and we basically got out. So I run it again, I click on the text, there's black. If I click red, the listener just took off, it changed the text to red. Change it to blue, it just changed it to blue. Visible, uncheck it, text is no longer visible. If I change it to red, we can't tell until I check there and put a check mark in there, and it's back to red. Okay? Click that and exit, boom. The program basically stops running. So pretty cool, pretty cool. Radio buttons, menu items, we can do a whole lot with that. I actually put a lot of Java code in some of those items as well. Okay, so let's talk about, there's this thing called a text area. And a text area is just that. Think of it as a big old text box. It allows us to either display items in it. We can set editable equals true or false, just like we could with the text box. And it allows us to have a nice big area to type in. So if you've got more than one line of text or one item to type, you can use a text area. It's just like any of the other ones. It does have a couple of parameters. We have to tell it how many rows and how many columns do we want. So we got to pass it 2 ints. First one is how many rows. Second one is how many columns. We're going to do text area. It's going to be basically, it also has 3 parameters. So we can do 2, which is 2 ints, or we can do 3, which the first one is a string, and that's the text it's going to display. And then again, the rows and the widths. Okay. So if we go back and take a look at this file chooser, this file chooser has a text area. So up here I've got text area, it's called log. If we come down here, I say log is instantiated as a new JText area 5,30. So 5 rows, 30 columns across. We set the margins. We got instantiated as a new and it basically has insets of 5, 5, 5, and 5. I mean, it's going to have 5 pixels, 5 pixels, 5 pixels, and 5 pixels all the way around this guy. We set editable equals true. We set the background color to orange, and we basically put it into a scroll pane. Okay, so when I run this guy, here is the orange. Now you can't really tell, since I made it editable, I can basically type a bunch of lines, and you'll notice that we have 5 pixels on the top, left, bottom, and the right. Okay, so if I were to come over here and change that to 15, 15, 15, and 15, and now when I run it, when I start typing, notice that I have a lot wider space. So there's more of a gap, top, bottom, left, and right. So that's a text area. Now with the text area, if we were to make it false, which is what this originally was set at, let me change these back to 5 each. Now when we display this, and I click choose a file, I can select that file, it displays it, and I can save file and save it as something else, and it basically displays that as well. Again, this is no longer editable. Okay, I can no longer click inside there and edit that guy. Now the one thing we can do with it, with a text area, is we have this thing called append. So right here when I say log.append, it takes whatever's inside of there and appends this onto it. Now notice we've got a new line on here, and all new line is this. It's basically just a /n. Okay, so if we scroll all the way to the top, we can see that that's what a new line is right there. So when I say append, I append the file name and then a /n, so it puts that file name on there and pushes the cursor down one. So when I add another one, there it is. Okay, with text areas, we do have scroll bars. We can actually add a horizontal and vertical scroll bar. We have three different variations we can do. We can do scroll bar as needed, meaning it will only add the scroll bar is if we need it. If I say scroll bar never, it will do just that. It will never put a scroll bar in there, which allows us to go past it. Okay, and we have scroll bar always, which will put a scroll bar on there no matter what. We also have a vertical scroll bar, so we can scroll this way and we can scroll this way. And again, same 3 things: as needed, never, and always. Okay, so we have this thing called fonts. Font is another item that we can do. So we can basically set the font as a font appearance. So there's a class called font, or we can go ahead and then the font is got 3 parameters. We got a string, int, and int. The first string is called the font name. The int is the style, and the int is the size. So these are the different fonts we have: dialogue, dialogue input, monospace, sans serif, and serif. Now the difference between sans serif and serif is this: with the letter T basically looks like this in a serif. Notice how it's got this little tag here, here, and the tag at the bottom. A serif just looks like that, just a standard T. Okay, no extra tags. And that's basically what they're trying to show there. So notice that none of these guys have little tags on them, where down here the S has little tags at the end, the F and the I have tags, and the R have little tags at the end. Okay, so if we go back over here and look at our menu item, I basically said message label dot set font as a new font, instantiate as a new font, sans serif, italics, and 16. So that font italics is actually putting a numeric value, which is an int in there, and I set the font size to 16, 20, and 24. So your font pane. Now I could do this. I could do italics, and I could actually concatenate font dot bold. So I want to italicize and bold it as well. So we could do that. So when I run it and I click on the red, there is my serif, font size 20. And it's also bolded. I click blue, it's basically a serif, change to 24. If I click black, black is a serif, meaning it doesn't have the little tags on it. And it's a font size of 16. Okay? So font's pretty cool as well. Pretty easy to use. Just set font, then instantiate as a new font because a font is a class, and these are the items that go in the constructor for the font class, and it basically changes that font. Okay, last thing we'll talk about is this thing called sliders, and sliders allow us to do just that. We create this thing called a slider, and here's one. This is a horizontal slider and a vertical slider. So to use it, we basically can, well, it needs basically 4 items. It needs to know if it's a horizontal or vertical. Next one is what number do you want to start with at your minimum value, what number is your highest value, and then where do you want that slider to start at. So this guy right here is a horizontal slider. It starts at 0, the highest number is 50, and we want to go ahead and put the slider at 25 when we start. Okay, so if we look up here, sure enough, that's what both those guys are doing. Just like any other value, we can add a listener. So when we slide that guy around, when we stop, the listener kicks off and does something. So here's what we want to do. We want to create this temperature. So it's going to start at 32 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius, and this is a Celsius scale. When we slide that guy across, it will tell us what the Celsius temperature is and what the Fahrenheit temperature is. So if I look at the I've got a J label, 2 text fields, 3 panels, and a slider. So here's my constructor, set the title, set my default when I click on the X. Here's 2 labels that I instantiate, it says Fahrenheit and Celsius. I instantiate my Fahrenheit temp. It's a text box. It defaults to 32.0, so that's in the box. And it's a font, it's a size of 10. We set editable equals false. I don't want you to be able to edit it. Celsius is instantiated. It's got 0.0 as the default inside the text box, and it's size of 10 as well. Its editable is false, meaning we can't edit it. I instantiate a new slider. It's horizontal. It starts at 0. Highest number is 100, and we are going to put the slider on 0. We set the major tick spacing at 20, meaning it's going to have a tick every 20. And so I should say major ticks. That means it's going to have a long tick, and then every 5 it's going to have a little tick. Okay. Paint tick marks equals true. Make sure you put the tick marks. And paint tick labels equal true. Make sure you put the numbers in there as well. I believe we'll put them on just the major. And we add a change listener to that slider, meaning when we slide it, we will let go. It's going to go ahead and execute that listener. So we go ahead and instantiate our panels. We add the labels and our Fahrenheit temps to each of those panels. We add it to the J panel to the C panel, and basically we add the slider to the panel as well. So that's all that's doing there, is adding a bunch of panels inside of panels, and then basically put it on the J frame. We set our layout to a grid of 3 rows, 1 column. We add our F panel and our C panel to the J-frame. We add our slider panel to the J-frame, and we go ahead and pack everything up, make sure it fits, and we set visible equals true. Now our listener, all it does is this, and our change state, meaning once we change something, the Celsius is an integer data, or I should say a double data type, and it's set to whatever the slider dot get value. So it goes to the slider, gets the value where we're currently at. Fahrenheit is equal to, we take whatever the Celsius is and we convert it to Fahrenheit. How do we do that? We take 9 divided by 5, we divide that, or we multiply that times Celsius, and we add 32 to it. Then our Celsius temp dot set text, that's our text box, we set it to a double dot toString Celsius. Okay. Our Fahrenheit temp set text is, we format that to a Fahrenheit, which I believe is a yes, our decimal format. So our decimal format is basically 0.0. Okay. Here's our public static void main, which when we it instantiates this class and automatically executes the constructor. So if we run it, this is basically as simple as it gets. There's our two text boxes with the default text of 32.0 and 0. We set our slider on 0. I slid it over here to 26 Celsius, and that is 28 or 78.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, when I click on each one of those, it automatically executes that listener. If I go to 100, it's 212, which is basically the basics of Celsius and Fahrenheit. Freezing is 32 in Fahrenheit, and it's 0 in Celsius. Boiling is 212 in Fahrenheit, 100 in Celsius. Okay, so that's pretty easy. That's all a slider is. It's kind of a neat little item to use. We can change the look and feel. I'm not going to go into all the detail on this, but just if you want to play around with this on your own, we can give what's called a metal look and feel, a motif look and feel, and a Windows look and feel. So if you look at the metal, notice how the slider looks a little different. With the motif, the slider looks a little different, and with the Windows, which we just use, it looks a little different as well. I'll try to put some examples in there as well. 13.12, a great thing to look at if you get a chance, some common errors that you want to avoid. With that, we'll call it Chapter 13 done. See you next time.